To be honest, I haven't read a Jack Ryan book since Clear and Present Danger. I've always liked the character and I enjoyed the books, but I'm not really sure why I didn't just keep going with reading the whole series. Probably because I'm easily distracted. So for those of you new to Jack Ryan novels, here's some things that you can always count on in a Jack Ryan story. You always have high-speed car chases, check. Do you have impossibly good-looking secret agent types? Of course you do, so there's another check. Do you have noble bad guys? Bad guys with a conscience? Sure you do. Check again. And then of course you have to have the exceptionally cruel bad guys as well, and yep, there's another check mark. So this book has all the elements you would expect from a Tom Clancy Jack Ryan novel. There's a lot to unpack in this book. There's quite a few different plot threads. So you have Jack Ryan, who is President of the United States. So obviously he's not running around shooting people and getting shot at like he used to do in the very early books that I was reading. Instead, those duties are assumed by his son, Jack Ryan Jr. So among the key plot threads, you have a possible revolution by a pro-West faction in Iran. You have the plot of a personal redemption narrative for a Russian spy with a conscience. Somewhat interwoven with that, you have an Iranian torture specialist's ruthless pursuit of anyone he thinks has crossed him. Think Inspector Javert from Les Mis for the single-minded determination that this torture specialist has in his work. You have a plot line involving Jack Ryan Jr. on the lookout for rogue nuclear weapons. And then you have President Jack Ryan dealing with his own issues, including a flu outbreak in the US, a malicious and vindictive senator who really has it out for him. You have a story where he's dealing with YouTube videos of him saying things that he never said, and then there's also an incident with the US Embassy overseas. For me, the Jack Ryan books have always been the intentional melding of a James Bond character with a super brainy Sherlock Holmes type of character. And these stories are always fun from the perspective of learning interesting little bits about FBI and CIA procedure, how they go about doing certain things at different points in their investigations, as well as some of the equipment they use. I always find that to be interesting. Now, of course, how much of any of it is real is up for debate, but then again, we don't really read these books for realism, do we? We read them because it's fun, it's an escape. We read them for entertainment purposes, and as a vehicle for entertainment, I think these books deliver. There were a few sections of the book that honestly it was very hard for me not to just skip over entirely. It was very hard to read them. Most of my issues had to deal with the torture scenes and the character of Sassani, who is the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps interrogation specialist. He just creeps me out on the page, and it's too easy for my brain to imagine people in real life being that cruel and that uncaring and that dismissive of other people's essential humanity. And so everything having to do with him was really hard for me to plow through as I'm reading the book. I have no doubt people like him exist in all government branches and all governments, and that makes my brain sad. And yeah, kind of took me to a little bit of an anxious, dark place. So I definitely finished this book and ended up learning a few interesting little factoids along the way, and I love that when that happens. So one of the things was I learned that in Russia in 1858 there was a move to hike the tax on vodka to stuff the government's coffers with extra money. There's a stereotype about Russians and drinking lots of vodka, but stereotypes usually come from a real place. And so the public were not happy with the government for taxing their vodka. And so they would protest that, and a bunch of people stopped drinking vodka and went to drinking other beverages. Whenever there were public protests, though, the military guard got involved and would publicly flog the protesters and in many cases forcibly pour vodka down their throats using funnels. Something else that came up during my reading of the book was the sections having to do with drone combat. And I think most people don't fully appreciate the trauma that could have potentially on someone's psyche. They feel that because a person isn't on the front lines actually taking fire in live real time with the real risk of immediate death and or debilitating injury, that it's not a big deal. But there's a couple sections in here that made me really think about how hard that must be to do your day job of spying on people with drones from like 12,000 feet up or even higher, and then using those same drones to turn them into nothing by launching missiles at them, to just erasing them from the planet. And then you go home at the end of the day and try to relate to your wife and kids and live your normal life, knowing that you spent days and weeks tracking someone's every move, and then it was your finger on the virtual trigger that literally ended that person's life. So that was something I took away after reading this book that I didn't ever give much thought to beforehand. And another fun little thing is that it's revealed that Dr. Kathy Ryan, Jack Ryan Sr.'s wife, wears a particular nail polish that makes the White House press office cringe, and they do their best to suppress the name of it from the press because they're worried about public perception because of the name of the polish. It's a real polish. My wife wears it. It's called I'm Not Really a Waitress, and it's a really pretty shiny red. So that was funny. So there's more to talk about, but in order for me to do that with you, it will be necessary for us to move over to the spoiler couch. Okay, so Dozhenko's story is more interesting to me than most of the rest of the book, quite honestly. And of course, you know his secret girlfriend, Miriam, is going to be killed because she's a secret girlfriend. It's a very well-worn trope. So his relationship to Sasani, the whole, back and forth between them, and then later him running from Sasani, all very interesting to me. When his storyline and Jack Ryan Jr.'s storyline with Isabel, that when those all intersect, that's when it gets really interesting for me. Speaking of Isabel, I have a feeling that her character and Jack Ryan Jr. have met before in another novel. I didn't get why there was so much emotional impact when she calls Jack Ryan Jr. for help. So that's really the only time I can think of where not having read some of the previous books might have detracted a little bit from the overall impact and oomph of a particular moment in the story. And the resolution with the storyline of Sasani was really anticlimactic. I mean, really anticlimactic for me. I mean, after all the buildup, so many chapters illustrating what a badass he was and how cruel and evil he was, you got to dislike the character so much. You wanted his comeuppance to be really painful and long and drawn out because of all the pain he had inflicted on other people. But no, his storyline was resolved by a cake knife to the neck. It was over way too quick, and he got off really easy. For me, it really undermined all of the gravitas that had been built up for his character. It felt like a Boba Fett on the barge in the desert moment for me. It really did. It was very anticlimactic. And then I noticed that there were a lot of plot lines that really they didn't seem to go anywhere. They were introduced and then just almost forgotten about, it felt like to me. Like the flu outbreak, not much is ever made of that after the conversation that Jack and his wife Kathy have about it. It didn't go anywhere. Likewise, the whole storyline, the embassy, the U.S. Embassy in Cameroon, that went nowhere too. I mean, it's it's resolved, but it didn't seem to make a difference to anything else in the larger scheme of things. It was like its own little self-contained short story, and it doesn't really impact any of the other main threads, especially to do with the rogue nuclear missiles or any of that. Okay, remember in The Last Jedi when they had that whole completely useless subplot involving Rose and Finn going to the dumb casino planet looking for some stupid hacker? And remember how that had no impact on anything, that it was completely useless and a waste of time? That's how I felt about the embassy plot line in this book. Okay, I think that's about it for spoilers for this one, so let's go ahead and go back over there. Okay, as far as who my brain cast in various roles throughout the book, for the character of Hugo Gaspard, who's only in the book for a very short amount of time, but I pictured a very overweight Gerard Depardieu. For Jack Ryan Sr., President of the United States, I pictured Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford will always be Jack Ryan to me, even though I think Alec Baldwin did a very good job portraying him in Hunt for Red October. For the part of Jack Ryan Jr., I was picturing John Krasinski from The Office, which is funny because, and I didn't realize this until after I read the book and did the video, but he's actually playing Jack Ryan in Amazon's series Jack Ryan. So the part that Harrison Ford plays in the early movies. So bottom line, if you like Tom Clancy novels, you'll like this one. I mean, Mark Cameron does a good job of pretending to be Tom Clancy and writing a Tom Clancy book. If you're brand new to these books and the character of Jack Ryan, again, the author does a very good job of keeping this a fairly self-contained story, and you really don't miss out, I don't think, if you haven't read any of the others. So that's it. As always, I will post links in the description down below of where you can pick this book up at. As always, I'm Ken McKim. You take care and read more books.